Hey, everybody. Welcome to Market Mavericks. We are back for another Thursday discussion with some ups and downs and craziness in the market following last week's big election and Federal Reserve cut. I'm joined by Scott Melker and Mike McGlone. So, gentlemen, how are you guys today and where are we starting?
Can we start with Gary Gensler resigning? Although he didn't officially do it, I have to say that maybe my proudest moment in life will be that I got
You want to get up and dance
hashtag.
around for this one?
I got the hashtag Fire Gary Gensler trading Fire Gary Gensler trending a long time ago, and it's been an effort that I've been behind for a very long time. And if he resigns, which we know he will, it's very happy. But he did give an address today. If you could show my screen, this morning, basically saying, he's proud to serve as SEC chair, defends his approach to crypto regulation, but everything was in the past tense. Sounded awfully close to a farewell speech that says here, listen, we know that he's not surviving a Trump administration. The question is if he's going to go willingly or by force. And I think that there's a lot of precedent for him to step out of the way, just like every commissioner in history has done when there's regime change. But, on his way out, there's a lot of interesting sort of news. Because nobody fears the SEC anymore, you can see here 18 U.S. states have filed to sue the SEC and its commissioners, accusing them of unconstitutional overreach and unfair persecution of the crypto industry under the leadership of agency chief Gensler. And you may have seen yesterday, when Pepe went up like 100%, that Robinhood is relisting things they had delisted out of fear of the SEC, and included listing Pepe and saying they'll list more meme coins and things like that. So clearly the veil or the threat of SEC has lifted. These companies, even before Trump steps in, are no longer fearful of poor regulation in the United States. I don't know if you guys also saw an unconfirmed report, but has gone viral and is seemingly being picked up by the news, that Trump intends to eliminate all capital gains on any crypto that is created in the United States. Saying that anyone who brings their company back to the United States will have no capital gains on those assets. That's like HBAR, XRP, all of those. But saying that all of these Americans who've run away for the last 8 years and said, we're not going to do anything in crypto in the United States, literally he's telling them, come here, register the company, launch what would have been an illegal unregistered security, and there will be no capital gains on that. Do I think that necessarily passes? No, but those are the kind of crazy things that they're floating right now.
Wow. And so I'm just looking, I just brought up XRP. It's up huge today. It's had a huge run. Do you think that's part of why it's
literally with Gensler saying he's going to resign and everybody knowing that these cases that the SEC has brought over the last 4 years are likely to magically disappear into the ether, I think is very bullish for these coins. XRP also was one of the ones getting listed on Robinhood.
Gotcha. Does Scott, does this open the door to bad actors too, though? I mean, obviously there's positives to this, but also does this open the door to shady stuff happening?
Sure. Right. I mean, the president himself might be doing some of it, right? So I can't speak for for how high quality World Liberty Financial is or is not, or his NFT projects. I'm not saying any of those are below board. Actually, when they launched World Liberty Financial, they did it through accredited investors and followed the current SEC laws. So nothing nefarious there, certainly. But I do think that this is obviously moving in a direction that's going to deregulate and allow a lot of people to do a lot of things. And so I think will be some increase in fraud abroad here, but also in other markets. I don't think that'll be unique to crypto. I think any financial fraud we've seen over time, if there's deregulation and less threat of litigation, that we'll see those things. But I think writ large, it's a really positive movement that innovation and entrepreneurship will be encouraged in the United States, particularly in this industry where it's been, dismissed for so long.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right on that. I mean, it's going to foster more entrepreneurial spirit in here in the US. And then, like you said, there'll be a few bad actors. There always is. But at the same time, hopefully the good outweighs the bad. All right. So, Mike, where are we on Bitcoin? I'm assuming you're still in the camp where you think that at some point it falls back down. I just want to show this chart real quick because I do have a chart on Bitcoin. This is an interesting trend line I've been following. It's interestingly enough, if you take the exact high of the first high in 2021 and connect it to the second high in 2021, that's exactly where Bitcoin has rallied to right here. And it's stalling. Now, listen, I'm not going to be here saying it's going to pull back significantly. I have no clue, frankly, but it is just interesting. But what are your thoughts on this, Mike? Where are we in this cycle?
Yeah, I'd like to share my screen if I can. And the key thing is the world changed a week ago. This is a paradigm shift. And you just mentioned it, the things that you're saying, Scott, just the fact that we can say that Mr. Gensler is going to be gone. I mean, this is a paradigm shift for cryptos. It's point facts. But you point out, I just look at that. I've been watching this one for a decade. It's that Bitcoin to gold ratio. It flipped obviously when the signal was when Mr. Trump tilted back on his anti-crypto stance in Nashville towards Bitcoin. You guys nailed that, and boom, now here we are. He's the president, and he's got, according to this, the headline will have an unusual amount of power. I mean, this is just, let's not underestimate the amount of what's going to happen here, because we have, in America, we don't think we do on steroids, both sides aisle, everything. But the problem is, I want to point out is, I overlay this again with the S&P 500 versus a 100-week moving average. I'm still worried about that. Is the market's completely priced for the last big trade. And maybe it happens again, but the last big trade was to buy stocks when Trump got elected. But here's where we were versus its 100-week moving average. The market was low, is this hanging out? Now we're at about the highest in, if you look at in a normal distribution, they'd call that the kurtosis part of it. Like the only time it gets there is like on the 4th or 5th standard deviation. It's just not a level you want to be overweight long. So the thing is, Bitcoin's probably going to continue to be the fastest horse in the race. The thing is, you pointed out in that chart, you want to be the first buyer here. And the thing I'm getting is the extreme amount of bullishness that comes out like, okay, we're going to get that strategic Bitcoin reserve. Mike Novogratz pointed out, well, that's kind of silly, but maybe that'll happen. There's so many extreme things. We're doing a lot of buy the rumor at the moment, and obviously can't be bearish. Look to buy dips. But again, it's, the world changed, and this is part of what's happened. So I just bow to the people who did it right.
Do you, Scott, and just looking over at Bitcoin's chart, I mean, we just talked about it before. I think you have it up here. I
just drew that line. That's incredible, by the way.
It is just wild how price reacts to these levels. But I guess the question is, I mean, are you seeing during the Trump administration, is it possible for Bitcoin to go north of 100,000 or even in the next year, let's say?
I think it's possible Bitcoin could go north of 100,000 in a week. I'm not saying that will happen, but I mean, we literally just went in 9 days from, this was election night, started at 69. We went to 93. Yeah. A $24,000 move. You can't tell me we can't go 7,000 off the highs from yesterday.
But I guess the question is, how high could this go in this bull market? I guess that's the bigger question.
I was a long believer that Bitcoin was fine regardless of who was going to be.
You were spot on.
I think it was going to go up. I don't think it was going to do this if Harris won this week. But the people who fear the government and money printing and who hoard guns and ammo, those people would be buying Bitcoin during a Harris administration, right? Because of fear of whatever they believe the Democrats are. And, we also have this sort of Trump trade of maybe it becoming a strategic reserve, all those things. Listen, I am a long believer, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. This is exactly what I thought would happen based on the 4-year cycle, whether that's the reason it happened or it's the Trump trade or it's Chinese stimulus. I have no idea. But this is exactly what I thought would happen in late October and early November. I've been saying that for at least a year, and so I'm not going to question it now. And if that follows through, I think, mid 100s, not that difficult, right? Like 125 to 150, I think would be sort of my baseline expectation for some point in the next year. Would I be surprised to see the 200s? Absolutely not. But listen, there's also now a lot of, we've got the movement. Everybody's anticipating it. So now I think we need to see some follow through from the government to continue it, right? I think that first 100 days, we need to really see a stablecoin bill or a market structure bill or really bullish sentiment from the SEC. Some of those cases drop. We're going to have to, Mike always says, where's the beef? We're going to need to see the beef from this administration and make sure that these weren't just empty promises.
Yeah. And one thing I want to bring up here, and this is kind of related with Doge / Department of Government efficiency. But if I'm hearing efficiency, I'm hearing lower debt, and yet interest rates are going up as if there's not going to be any reduction. I guess the question is, Elon Musk got named to this board, and then the yields went up as if he's not going to have any power and get any cuts across the board. And I wonder what you guys think about that. I mean, that's what the market's telling us with yields going up.
So let me tilt on that one a little bit, and I want to show that in the chart. When I think of yields, I got to start with copper. Copper's broken down. I show copper, gold, S&P 500, right there. There's S&P 500. It was gold, and crude oil since the unlimited friendship was announced on February 4th, 2022. and copper's breaking down. It's to me, this is the whole world that I see from a commodity standpoint tilting towards recession. And significantly now because of one key reason: trade balance. I mean, I mentioned the book. I think I mentioned it last week. The book I just finished listening to was "No Trade is Free" by Robert Lighthizer, the last trade representative, likely the next trade representative, and expect massive tariffs. But the significance is our trade balance with the rest of the world is the most ever, and it's almost double during the last Trump administration. So the rest of the world has a big problem, and you're seeing that with copper breaking down. Copper just broke below $10,000, and I want to point out one key chart about bond yields. This is all on the same scale. I have copper 10-year note, S&P 500 just divided by 1,000, diesel prices in the U.S. and Chinese bond yields. Right now, Chinese bond yields are 2.08%. They're collapsing. They have been, and U.S. 10-year note yields are like right now they're 4.45. So to me, the risk is still, I've been wrong on this trade. I admit it. To me, this still is potentially the next big trade. Now, it's completely off the radar right now. But if you look at the rest of the world, U.S. yields are really high, bond yields. And everybody points out the deficit. Yes, get it. Known. Maybe it'll be a shift. But one thing I want to point out as far as deflationary forces is it's more likely we're going to head towards the rest of the world. And I want to point out one good thing why. Within a few months, the average price of gasoline in this country is going to drop below $3. If it doesn't, blame McGlone. It's what it always does. This is the average price. And here's one good reason. And the risk is it goes to $2. But what's unusual about 2? Nothing. This is 20 years of data. It always goes down to 2. Now, we made a big spike, but one key indication is what's happening we have a massive excess of supply of grains and fuel and energy. This is what used to be called net imports. It was only the U.S. crude oil net imports. It's running to pretty massive exports, meaning if we have a trade war, which is virtually guaranteed, the U.S. is going to win because partly from this book, our exports are our global trade for the U.S. is only about 11% of GDP. For most of the rest of the world, particularly like China and Europe, it's closer to 25% of their GDPs. And you saw the massive trade balance. This is the most ever. So my point is, when we kick into this trade war, which is going to start with pretty cross-the-board tariffs, according to Mr. Lighthizer's book, why not? He has complete carte blanche. He's complete red sweep. He's going to do what he says. Why fight that? We should expect gas prices to collapse. And the risk is, I'm afraid they go to 2, which usually means a recession. Hopefully we're not going to get that. But just dropping below 3, 250, that's going to be very helpful for CPI and PPI and consumers who are going to get hit by higher goods prices.
So Mike, are you saying that, like the one thing, and this is partly related to Bitcoin, is that, yes, Trump is dovish towards crypto and deregulation, but could possibly some of this upside in Bitcoin be because of a potential blanket tariffs, which is inflationary, and then Bitcoin gives us the protection of inflationary higher deficits and all these other things? But I guess that's the question is what are we seeing here? With, what you're saying is kind of like, okay, we're going to be okay in a trade war, but is it not inflationary then? Will it not be inflationary?
It'll be initially, yes. I mean, the number one importer of Chinese goods in this country is Walmart. And that's Joe Sixpack. That's the average person. I mean, I had 4 kids. I did a lot of shopping at Walmart. And so that's going to be hurt initially, but getting to and from there is going to be cheaper. Gasoline inflation prices, diesel prices will be cheaper. It'll be an offset. It's the point is from my standpoint, when I point out here from a commodity standpoint, the world, as you see copper collapsing and crude oil going down and stock market going up and way outperforming S&P 500 since then, the world's heading towards a pretty significant recession. And it's going to happen. The thing is, we have an administration now that's completely emboldened, and it has like one of the richest people in the world and some of these tech people whose mantra is move fast, break things, and worry about it later. And that's what they're going to do. It's just, why would they not? They have 2 years before the midterms. They said they're gonna. They have a complete decisive victory. Expect it to happen. So to me, that's what's finally hard. Copper starting to show that it's breaking down. And I show you that's what's going to probably be with bond yields. But this inflation thing, remember what's happening with inflation. We're in the wrong part of the cycle for inflation. Employment's ticking higher. How much Trump going to help that? I don't know. Unemployment by exporting all immigrants, that's going to kick unemployment up and push GDP down. The Fed has started to ease. It's typically not a good idea to buy short bonds when the Fed eases, and you're also paying a very high price, almost double the yield you get in China, which is the next significant commodity country. So the phrase I've been hearing, at least from this book, is this is a strategic decoupling from China. Now it's accelerating and big time. And China is a massive deflationary force at the moment. So the way I see it is you absolutely need the US stock market to stay up. And that's where I point out the bond market and gold are just waiting, I think, for just a normal correction in the stock market. And then they take off. And that's what I think is going to happen. I mean, bond prices, that is, but bond yields are just waiting. So we've gone through that initial flush. We unwound a lot of those overweight long positions in bonds. And now, it's just what's the next big trade? The U.S. stock market has to stay up, or it's just a matter of time bond yields catch up to the rest of the world. Now, then with this, the average of the top 5 countries, including China, their bond yields are averaging about 100 basis points below the U.S. Before 2008 crisis, they averaged 100 basis points above the U.S.
Wow. All right. So going back to yields, right? Generally, we don't see yields go up with the stock market up, with gold up, with all these things. So are you thinking that is going to revert back to what's normal, or they're all going to fall together?
Well, that's the problem. It's the key thing I point out is like right here. If you look at the S&P 500 or the U.S. stock market and GDP paces, it's 2 times. Okay, that's the lessons of history. Is you never want. That's what happened in Japan. It's what happened in China 10 years ago. It's what happened in the U.S. in the 1920s and 30s. When you get to 2 times GDP, it's all that matters. And at the same time, the U.S. stock market, I also point out, versus the rest of the world, MSCI, it's the highest ever. That's a great thing as long as it keeps going up. But if we ever get a little reversion in that, to me, that's what the commodity markets tell me. At some point, commodity markets are breaking down, and copper is just getting started, which means the yields are very high. U.S. yields are on the cusp of catching up to the rest of the world. What's going to keep them up? One key thing is this unlimited U.S. deficit spending. I get it, but Japan's been doing that for a lot longer than we have, and their yields are much lower. So to me, this is what we're on the cusp of, and I see it is it's it's the chart I pointed out here, right here. Let me just show you this one right here. Let's look at the Trump side. What's the psychology right now? The market's completely priced for what happened last time. It was a great thing to be long stocks when Trump was elected, but this is where stocks were when he was elected in 2016. This is where they are now. Super expensive. Just a little bit of normalization. I know I've been saying it for a while, but we're so priced for perfection. That's where we have to look for the little tweaks that might happen. That's why I'm watching copper very closely. It's got to go up. Otherwise, to me, but I'll end with the copper going down leaves the inordinate burden to keep the whole economy and the whole world away from the normal deflation that follows the kind of inflation we had last time. It's all on top of it. It's got to be the U.S. stock market has to stay at least buoyant.
Gotcha. Yeah. Scott, one thing I was kind of crossing my mind earlier today is how hard it is to sign up for some of the exchanges like Binance if you're in the US and all this KYC nonsense. Do you think under Trump that goes away? Because honestly, one of the struggles that I have is you have to kind of jump through a bunch of hoops if you want to short crypto.
You see that the FBI raided the Polymarket CEO's apartment yesterday because they allowed U.S. users to trade using probably a VPN on Polymarket. At least that's the presumed reason, which is exactly one of the reasons that Binance got in trouble. Yeah, I think that's likely to all go away, or at the very least, the assets that you want to trade on those other exchanges come to American exchanges, so you don't need to find them elsewhere. I also think probably that leverage will be eventually allowed on some of those exchanges like Coinbase in the United States. Low leverage, I would say, 5x and lower probably. I can't imagine 100x YOLO. Yeah, and I think that there's going to be just a listing bonanza where we're going to be able to trade all of that stuff. And so, yeah, I think that's going to be very different. I think Americans are going to be allowed to do almost everything that everyone can do everywhere else.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at what you have on your screen here, this Kobayashi letter.
Yeah, this was something else just based on what you guys were talking about that I actually wanted to ask you guys about. So obviously, Kobayashi, a bit hyperbolic sometimes, but the Fed's worst nightmare has begun. Obviously, we're talking about stagflation. We now have multiple rising inflation metrics with signs of a weakening labor market. For the first time since September 22, both CPI and PPI inflation are officially back on the rise. This obviously doesn't gel with deflation in the short term, but obviously, we have some leading indicators that temporary help services jobs are rising. That's a leading indicator, obviously, of unemployment. But listen, if unemployment's about to shoot to 6% and inflation is rising, it's not a great scenario.
It's not, but I think a key thing to think about that too is we have the greatest wealth effect in our lifetimes, and hopefully it will get more. And to expect inflation to go down when we stock market's up 30% on a 1-year basis, almost 2 years in a row, is kind of silly. It's just reverted. And that's why I look at it as it's a bit of the inordinate burden right now. That everybody's talking about bond yields going up and everything. It's like that. It's predicated on one thing: U.S. stock market has to stay strong, and that's why I look at it is it's got to stay up. That's why I'm worried about. I can just show you one chart. Is the key chart I'm watching is this S&P 500 to gold ratio. It's I'm going back 100 years. And this is definitely not a level you want to be overweight S&P 500. And that's what's happened. It's been flat for quite a while. S&P 500 for gold. Everybody wants it to go up. You need it to go up. But what if it just trickles down a little bit where, gold continues to outperform? It has been for 3 years now. The S&P 500, that's significant deflationary forces because it's already happened in commodities. Again, obviously I'm biased. I think I've been distorted a little bit because I'm biased. By crude oil at 68, the peak was 130 just a couple of years ago. I see corn back below 3, natural gas back down. Everything in commodities is deflationary with the exception of copper is hovering, and it's all tilting that way. What stops it?
Do you think so? So we're all assuming that these tariffs go into place, deportations, which can be inflationary since those are generally low-skilled workers working for very cheap. Do you guys think that if the stock market and economy slip towards recession, is there a chance Trump says, "Hey, we won't do this because it would put more pressure on the economy," or you think it's like he's like a bullet?
I think the deportations are coming.
Yeah.
Regardless, tariffs, I think, is a bargaining piece. I'm not saying he won't do it. I think he will to some degree, but I think that's also, some bluster and putting other countries on notice, particularly China. I mean, we'll see.
Well, and I think, just to keep in mind, like, look at who he's put in. Marco Rubio has been majorly, against China, and he's in a huge position now too. So I think he's putting the right cabinet members in to be really hard on China.
Up all the Floridians, man. We all live in Florida. It's like all Floridians across the board. It's crazy. I mean, Rick Scott got dinged, luckily, for Senate majority, but like Matt Gaetz being floated for Attorney General, guess that one's wild.
That one is wild. That one is really wild.
Florida men.
Mr. Trump is doing exactly what General McMaster opined he would do in a second term, a complete autocratic leader with yes men on his side. He's doing it, and he has a complete carte blanche. Do not underestimate the power of America now and capitalism on steroids. And so, sure, if we get that little recession tilting over, you can do a lot of stuff. Obviously, put pressure on the Fed, but they started easing already. But this is from a regulation standpoint, it's great. I get all that. The problem is how much of it is already priced in, and that's why I point out the markets are so expensive already. You got to think that sometimes it could be a buy the rumor.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning. And I think, when I was talking to David Lynn recently, and we were talking about how, when Reagan got in, it was this big rally up. And when he got in, there was actually a big market correction right afterwards. And there's been countless kind of scenarios about how there's this big leading rally in the markets and then this kind of drop off afterwards. So it'd be interesting to see if that does occur in this situation, maybe in late January, February, March of 2025. But yeah, I mean, it certainly is going to be a wild next 4 years. I think, I don't know what else
I'm looking for the next 4 months.
4 months, that too. So I think we'll hold on to our seats. Now, just turning back to the crypto markets, one question I have is this the, we've obviously seen Ripple go, Cardano's rallied. I mean, all of these coins that were at multi-year lows have started to rip. And just to kick it back to you, Scott, is this something where you're looking to get in on these now, thinking it's the beginning, or was this a pop just on this expectation and you could see a letdown?
It depends on your time frame. I think all coins are absolutely going to rip in the not so distant future. I'm happy to be looking at coin market cap here, but you can't fight the trend. And Bitcoin dominance obviously has done nothing but go up, right? And Bitcoin dominance obviously just shows you exactly the relationship between Bitcoin and altcoins. 61% yesterday. I mean, these are new highs the entire time, dropping off a bit today. But when we really start to see this truly break down, it's going to get a lot of fun, I think, for altcoins. Listen, if Mike's right and we get a huge stock correction, altcoins are going to suffer, right? But as long as the music is still playing, I think that this is coming. Once again, this aligns very well with what's happened every other cycle. Bitcoin kind of makes its move. It finally settles. And then we see the liquidity trickling down. And there's definitely new money here to have seen. During last week, during the election week, we saw major moves on altcoins, outperforming even Bitcoin on the way up. There was a lot of new money. If you take a look at the total market cap of crypto, it reached 3 trillion, which is the highs of 2021, right? The highest it ever was. It just made the highs, and this cycle, if it's coming, hasn't even started, right? So imagine a blue sky breakout on the market cap and altcoins just going nuts. I think that's going to happen. So I'm just kind of in if you get significant pullbacks and dips, I think they're buyable until further notice. If we start to get a serious slide in global markets, then I will start to revise my opinion.
Yeah, Mike, one thing on the global markets that I think is interesting is that while the US has been making new all-time highs, I don't think any other major power like the UK, the Japanese markets, even the European markets are still not making new highs, and they haven't made new highs for months now. And I guess the question is, obviously the Trump trade is driving it for the last week, but what's behind that? Is because the global economies are now so much weaker, and the US is looked as the last shining star kind of thing?
Yes, I got to show you the two charts. First of all, they are so much more dependent on exports to U.S. than any time in history, and we just elected the most tariff-happy president ever. The thing about it that really struck me is these are things I remember speaking to about with customers 30 years ago in the trading pits. It always pissed me off that we just let these surpluses grow, and now they're massive. And this is one thing that Trump wrote about in the 80s. So I obviously agree with him on this, but here's the key thing I want to point out. This is the U.S. stock market versus the MSCI ex-U.S. I mean, it's just a straight upward chart. No, just straight up, all-time highs. We go back 50 years. What's going to stop that? And this is what's happening in commodities, and obviously probably distorted some of my U.S. views, but the world is heading towards a pretty severe recession, particularly with the U.S. It's a headline on The Economist I hear that's coming out recently is what's the rest of the world going to do? And I want to point out one key indicator I see a lot from commodities is this is something that I've been writing about for almost a year now. When you have gold outperforming industrial metals like this, it means something. The only time it's ever been there this high was in the first time was the great financial crisis. A little bit of a bounce in 2016, obviously during COVID. This is the longest period since the COVID that gold is just blasting off versus industrial metals. So from this key indicator, when the rock, precious metals beats industrial metals, that's a bad sign for the global economy. That basically means China. That means all these countries that are exploiting the U.S. and stealing wealth from the U.S., which is what Lighthizer says, that flip has switched. It's over. And I think they're going to come out as hard as we expect in tariffs. Tariff first, negotiate later. And that's one thing Lighthizer pointed out. They went through all these negotiations, and all the other countries, he pointed out, they thought they had the upper hand. And it was kind of silly when you're running a massive surplus with the country. So what I think is going to happen is they're going to say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to come in right away. These are what the tariffs are going to be. And you kind of negotiate your way out of them. Otherwise, until you show major signs of reducing all that excess of money take out of the U.S. and don't return, we're going to do something about it. And that's completely solidified by both houses, and most of the population agrees with him. So how Trump got the world to tilt against China? One of the key things he did. Now he's getting the world and the whole country to completely agree with what he's going to do about reducing this massive U.S. trade deficit.
So just turning it back to China here. So China's obviously struggling in a horrendous recession. They've stimulated. It hasn't done really anything at this point. Are you thinking that the U.S. slips into recession and China slips out, or are they going to need the U.S. to come out of a recession as well?
The U.S. recession means China's in a depression. It means the rest of the world's in a depression. And that potentially could happen. If we just have a slight, and Trump probably gets that. So my thought is, here's a person whose legacy now. He's going to think, how do I want history to judge me? And he's so emboldened, rightly so, missed the assassination attempt. The population completely went for him. It was a complete decisive election. And so if he gets the midterms, it gets through a bit of the pain first, he's good. If he gets through the end of the 4 years, gets through the pain first, that's probably when he's going to want. But a U.S. recession means depression in the rest of the world. It's already happening in China. Just look at demand for diesel and demand for and bond yields. They're all tilting that way already. And this is just adding fuel to that fire. The tariffs.
Last thing I'll ask here is so does excessive tariffs on China push them even more into the arms of Russia, North Korea, and Iran, or is that I mean, is that an issue geopolitically?
So you have to think right now within the book, The Party, was McGregor, I think, wrote about. There's some major infighting in China, but you can't. I mean, it's such an autocratic leader right now, but it pushes them. But do they import anything? No. But the key thing that's happening is by Mr. X's cozying up to Mr. Putin, he completely set up a nice little conduit from the key countries in the world who are antagonists and want nuclear weapons, North Korea and Iran, to get them from Russia. So this is how massive the Cold War is. Yet we're priced for in this country for complete détente, which is part of the reason I'm still bullish gold. So maybe if we get that some détente, but unless you get a regime change in China, this is the key thing that Lighthizer pointed out is China views us as a complete adversary. Xi has said it. Certainly, he proved it with the backup of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the unlimited friendship. Now we're accelerating, and the whole U.S. government's completely emboldened to do something about it. I'm like, good luck, China. Remember what happened to Japan? At least they were friends. But Japan's GDP right now is the same it was in 1993. Expect similar, maybe worse in China.
All right. So last question, Scott, is let's see if we have Market Mavericks hopefully next Thursday. Are you thinking crypto will continue to trade up there? Are you expecting? It seemed like you were maybe saying, hey, listen, it's had a big run. Maybe it needs to pause a little bit. So we'll pull back before in the next move.
I don't know when the pullback comes, but when you go from 70 to 93, it's a pretty good move. I was kind of joking the other day on Twitter, like the absolute killer move right now, if you're a hilarious whale who's manipulating the Bitcoin market, is send it to 99. Come up just short of 100, drop back down to test the previous all-time high at 74 as support. You got like a 25% drop. Everybody calls it over when it's literally the line that you were all watching to break, a month ago, and then send it to 150, right? And we're so back. It's all over. New paradigm. The good times liquidating everybody on both sides.
It's almost like they have fun with the crypto investors because they're so emotional,
But that's the thing you
described. It up on the biggest days ever on these elections. It's crazy.
But you described one of the most. This is the most significant trading vehicle 24/7 in the history of mankind. And it's also digital gold. It's just everything. And I just bow to whatever Scott says is what Bitcoin's probably going to do.
Nice. That's a great way to end it. I love it, guys. Well, thank you so much. Everyone follow the socials below on X, and we'll see you guys all hopefully next week. Have a good one, guys. Take care.
Yes.